Hello, everyone, and welcome back to All Indie. Today we have some more dev talk. I'm here with Arkicade, and we are going to talk about her game today called A Monster's Insight. How are you doing
Oh,
today?
I am doing fine. Thank you so much for hosting me. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good. So before we start talking about your game, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I go by Arkicade online. My ethnicity is half Korean, half Italian. I've just like moved around a bunch of places. But my main reason why I got into video games or game making was mainly through indie games. So a lot of I don't know if you know of like RPG horror games, the classics like Ebe, Mad Father, Witch's House, because although I did grow up like playing video games, mostly on like the Nintendo DS and like a lot of Nintendo stuff, that those sort of indie games made me realize, oh, I could make games too. And I started making games at like freshman year of high school, end of middle school, but only recently have I started publishing them online, mostly because I've been able to finish games. Like a lot of it's actually really difficult to finish games, and that's one thing a lot of indie developers have to overcome. Most of my games on my page, though, were made for game jams. But what's special about A Monster's Insight is even though it was made for a game jam, it was the most time I've spent on a completed product. Did this all in a month, and I had LGM help me with the music, and Sayumi, she helped with some menu buttons. I'll show you. I think we just saw maybe the title screen just now, like so sort of like the start load menu buttons. That's what she did. So yeah, that's A Monster's Insight is my biggest project to date, probably my favorite, the one I'm most proud of, but it still has a long way to go because it was made for a game jam, and I acknowledge that.
Wow. Okay. So you made this in a month?
Yeah, yes.
Wow. I
But
think that's the fastest project so far. Is
yeah,
is A Monster's Insight in a month?
it's I will tell you it was not easy though. I had to because here's the thing, when you're making projects, the first project you do, it has to be like small and simple. I was only able to like make A Monster's Insight because I spent maybe like 8 months of making games. Like you've seen before I made Monsters Insight, I made about 7 completed games, and it was sort of all building up to this. And the thing about the games that you first make, at least as an indie developer, is those aren't necessarily the games that you dreamed of making and going on to award shows presenting to people. It's not like that. It's more of things that you can get done and things that you can polish. Whilst A Monster's Insight it was a bit strange because during development, I had this thing of on one hand, I need to get this finished. It's a game jam. It's not that big of a deal. And on the other hand, it's like, wow, I'm actually really invested in this concept. I've been thinking of this world for quite a while. I don't want to do it a disservice. So it was like a push and pull of add more content, polish it, or just release it. The deadline is approaching. So those are kind of like the tug of war whilst developing this game.
Wow. Okay. So, two questions that come
Mm-hmm.
out of that. So, did you program all of this, or did you use like, I don't want to say like RPG Maker or Unity or anything like that?
Okay. I wanted to make this game in Unity, but okay, I was going to implement a fungus tool, but basically, I switched to RenPy. I made this game in RenPy purely because like fonts weren't working in Unity for fungus. It was not working, so I was like, okay, I can't make this in Unity because normally I like to make my games like C Sharp Unity. I've tried a bit of Godot. Pico 8 is a really good engine. I jump around a bunch of different engines, so I returned to my roots with RenPy because my first game I ever made was using RenPy. It was called Gulam. Not, it's an old project. It's okay. And the thing that's different though is versus like Gulam or my other RenPy projects, A Monster's Insight, it had a lot of external coding. So what that means is like you have the base engine of RenPy that helps with like text appearing text on the screen and saving. But for mini game sections, for particle effects, for like cursor movement with mouse, that required a lot of just my own knowledge of programming and external things. And oh yeah, I'll also tell you this. I did the programming. I'm also the artist on this game, so I did all the art, game
Wow.
design, writing. So it's like it's all of that in this one project, which is why at times like it's a bit weird like doing everything at once because I genuinely believe that it's really great to have other people on board. It's that I was scared during development, like, oh, if I don't get this finished, I don't want to like drag other people down with me. But when I hired a music composer, LGM, I was like, okay, really have to follow through with this. And I'm like, okay, if I'm getting a music guy, might as well have someone help me with like menu buttons as well. So because I was already deep into like everything else.
Oh, okay. Was there ever a moment during game development where you were like programming and you programmed this one area and this one feature, but you like didn't have an art asset for it, and so you had to like stop programming and go make an art asset, and you kind of like I don't know.
Ooh.
I don't know how
Oh,
to. I don't know
no,
how
yeah,
to.
I understand. Yeah, no, I understand the question. I think more people should do this. I wrote the entire game before I did a single art asset because for me at least, even it's weird because what I like to do normally for my games is I like to draw. Once I get bored of drawing, I write. Once I get bored of writing, I program. And thus, once I get bored of programming, I start drawing again. And it's like the cycle repeats. But because I wanted this game to get finished so badly, I was thinking to myself, okay, your game can have the prettiest art, or you can put so much effort into your art, all you like. But if it's not playable, if people can't play through your game, if it's not finished, then it's not a game. So I said, okay, I wrote the entire game out. And essentially, imagine like you see the footage you see now. Imagine like all of this, but with no art. That was like what it looked like for the first 2 weeks, 1.5 weeks. I did do the occasional background here and there because burnout is a real thing. I was writing at some days like 5,000 words a day. It was
Right.
actually ridiculous. So I had to do like drawing to take my mind off things. But so I wrote everything first, then I did art, and then I did some programming whilst I was writing, but I also did a lot of programming near the end, not so much art near the end of the process. But I was like very tempted to add more things, but you just need to know your limitations. You need to know your scope. Again, 1 month game jam. Have to keep it simple. So yeah, I think that's the question.
So, um, when you did a lot of like with a lot of writing and a lot of programming, since this is a very much a text based game, did they go hand in hand while you were sort of programming? You had to write some stuff out.
Oh, for RemPy, writing is very similar to coding because the way how RemPy syntax works is, for example, you need something to appear in a text box. You literally, like for this thing, because that's going to be our only source of nourishment, you literally put that in quotations and like within the correct label and stuff, and it appears on the screen. Normally, for a lot of games, what they do is they have a writer write it up in a Word document, and then like the programmer looks at it and it's like, okay, I'll put it in the code. What I had to do is I didn't have the luxury of seeing my words written out in a nice Google Doc or a Word document. I was writing and programming at the same time. So I didn't really have a chance to like reflect on my writing because writing it was also programming it at the same time. And I think you saw earlier that there was like a menu choice. So whilst I was writing, yeah, you see right now, I was writing and I was implementing menu choices at the same time. So that's what I meant when I said that there was a little bit of programming at the start and there was programming at the end as well.
Sure. Okay. So I think my second question that came out of your earlier statement was how on earth did you come up with the game like this? Um, I think you described it as like gaslighting eldritch horrors. You're there to like persuade them or die trying, or you can blackmail them. Like, what were some of your inspirations for this game?
So many. I'll start with like the monad of this concept, which was GMTK released a video entitled "Can we make talking as fun as shooting?" And when I watched that video like a few months ago, and like the idea was rattling in my mind where so many games, power is determined by combat, right? It's like how strong you are in
Sure.
battle. But I was thinking to myself that a lot of in real life, a lot of power is not necessarily determined by your physical strength, but it's determined by your words. Are you a good sophist, demagogue? Can you like sway public opinion? That is mostly how people obtain power. Moreover, this is like a slight tangent, but a lot of media nowadays they present sort of talking things out as the peaceful solution, as noble and virtuous. But I was really interested in spinning that. Like for example, the character of Iago in Othello, like it's been a classic staple in all of literature of the little cunning character hiding in the shadows who is really cowardly, which is seen to be a sin, but they're so good at persuading people that they can trick the heroes into doing their own bidding just through words, and they don't even realize it. And I thought that would be a super interesting protagonist to have, where your biggest defect is you're not strong enough. And I really wanted to emphasize that in the game. Pretty much every single other monster, if they could kill you. But the reason they don't is because of the power of your words. So that's like point number one of debating things. Point number two of cosmic horrors. I think there's just a lot of media that centered around human and like the human experiences. Um, and I was just interested in sort of putting everything in a world where human morals don't apply. The reason for that is okay, if this game is going to be about debating and it's going to be about words, then we need to think a lot about our cultural mores, systems we have in place, what convinces people, like a lot of that psychology. Again, because it was a game jam, I was like, okay, I don't know if I have the time to sort of write really in depth conversations. But if it's set in a fictional universe filled with no humans, then I can write moral. I let the player suspend their disbelief because maybe in this world it's like, oh, killing, I killed this person today. If it was a human, we'd go like, wait, hold on, why aren't you arrested by the police? You should be in jail. But in this world, because as monsters, we don't need to necessarily think about morals. They go about things different ways. And on that note, that's why a lot of the characters I wrote, or at least two of them, you'll see like Fernway and Cormeum, they were based on philosophical schools of thought. So Fernway was based on a combination of Agrippine and Cartesian skepticism, and Cormeum was based on um, hedonism, but like the two types of hedonism, like Aristipian hedonism and wait, Epicurean hedonism. Yes, that's it. So I guess like okay, so to summarize, I wanted a game where talking was the weapon you had, and I wanted to center it on monsters to help with philosophical conversations regarding that. And also, I've just always loved monsters and creature designs, and I wanted to make a game with monsters for quite some time. So this is the game. It's and I've been thinking about these characters. So this is like the culmination of those 3 points.
Okay. So none of this was inspired by Lovecraft. Because when I first saw the little GIF when you post the link, and when I think I saw the post on Reddit, my first thought was like, oh man, you've been reading Lovecraft and you've been trying to figure out how you can survive the psychic pressures of an eldritch horror. Did any of the ideas come from like some of the horror sci-fi movies, or yeah, I keep going back to Lovecraft because that's sort of the classic.
Yeah, strangely enough, I am familiar with Lovecraft and I'm familiar with his stories, but I haven't really analyzed them. If anything, I've been more inspired by works that were inspired by Lovecraft. So, wait, I saw Lovecraft Country, and I thought that was a visually stunning show, and it's an incredible show. Although it has some problems. This isn't a review of Lovecraft Country. And also just I suppose like just the concept of Lovecraft. I actually encountered Lovecraft more in board game spin-offs, like so a lot of Arkham Horror, Cthulhu Calls,
Yeah.
and a lot of story based on board games. Surprisingly, weird source of inspiration. But um, and what bothered me is again sort of how a lot of these stories it's all about sort of human suffering and oh when we face this inevitable doom we'll all just melt away, which I think is fascinating. Like I'm really interested in philosophy, so I like that concept a lot. but I just wanted to do something a bit different with it. And I don't think we've ever explored sort of a Lovecraftian world from an Eldritch Horror's perspective. And more so, we've not really done that in a visual novel format. Like, visual novels in general, there are a few horror visual novels, but yeah, it's I don't know. I thought those would make for an interesting combination of not only gameplay medium but story themes and characters.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So we've kind of seen a little. We've talked a little bit about the monsters, and we're seeing a little bit of the tutorial here. What drew you to the philosophical principles? I'm not familiar with them. I mean, are they based around human doubt? Are they based around maybe existential crisis or something like that? What drew you towards those principles?
Oh, I mean, there's again two parts to this. Part number one, I'm very interested in studying philosophy. I'm not in university yet, but when I do, I plan to double major in computer science and philosophy. So, like, that's the major I have in mind. That's what I want to study. So, obviously, that's why I'm passionate about it. Why I'm drawn to philosophy within monsters, sort of linking it back to the earlier answer, was it was easier to because I was on a limit and I needed to write characters with philosophies. I didn't have the time to come up with my own lore. It's like, oh, these monsters identify as this. It's a lot easier to just code them as Hellenistic schools of thought. So
Sure.
it's easy for me to write Fernway as a skeptic. It's easy for me to write Cormeum as two types of hedonists because that's what I'm familiar with and that's what I can write. But there is one sort of philosophical theme that I didn't anticipate would appear in my game and ended up appearing there. And it was a little bit relating to aesthetics because slight spoiler, but not really. But the protagonist, I was thinking a lot about what drives them to take over the world in essence. Like, why do they need to siphon the souls? Because they give the excuse throughout the game of, oh, I need this to survive. But I made it very clear that it's not about surviving for them, it's about thriving within this world. And I'm like, okay, but why do they want to do that? It's a fun character to write, certainly, but there needs to be a motivation. I think a lot of characters, they are two things: they're their want and they're their need. It's like a classic film school principle. And when I was thinking about their wants and their needs, um, I was thinking about sort of what drives them to do things. And for me, at least, I found like there being some sort of insecurity to be very interesting. It's like, okay, they're this smooth talking con man, but there's some deep insecurity. Okay, what is that? And I think you saw in the beginning of the game, there's this red being that seems to insult you a lot and says these very mean things about you. Why is that? That's because they come from a species of siphons. In case I think I heard people pronounce it siphons, but it's a siphon. These species of siphons, what happened to our protagonist, the Silver Tongue, is when they were born as ugly. Okay, let's put a point in there because I don't know how much science fiction media you've consumed, but a lot of sort of alien teaming up with human outcasts, a lot of their backstory is, well, I wasn't accepted by my own kind. The reason they weren't accepted is there's a hint of like sort of social Darwinism in there, where it usually again circles back to the point of they weren't strong enough. They had some form of disability, therefore they were unable to survive. And that's looking at aliens in quite a primitive way. Sort of like the only things these greater beings are concerned about are about survival within this world. So social Darwinism. But I thought an interesting twist on that, and something I think a lot of people can relate to, is, what if they just don't like you because of the way you look? Because of your deformed, you don't have a disability. Like the protagonist can do anything that any of the other siphons do. That's not an issue. The issue is purely on aesthetics and the way that they look. And because of that, they were belittled. So there's like hints of parental issues in there. And as I was writing, I was like, oh, I didn't actually realize that this was going to be their motivation until like later on in development. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm growing to like my main character just like a bit more. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I decided to include that. Obviously, sort of like questioning your own worth, value, existence. That's a little bit of existentialism, a sprinkle of metaphysical thought in there. But um, yeah, so that's like an unexpected philosophical point that I didn't expect. But yes,
So something that we're seeing on the screen here are the three P's of your game.
yes.
Um, Part of what I thought was really interesting about this is that you really stepped away from the, I'll say, like the classical D&D perspective, which is like wisdom and I'm trying to think of what the other one is.
Wisdom, like strength, dexterity, stamina.
Yeah, yeah.
I know
Well,
it's
so
easier.
yeah, and within D&D they also have like, persuasion, or you could even, sort of expand that into diplomacy, and there's even intimidation. Um what made you want to step away from sort of that pre-built system, I'll say, and sort of kind of bend it into your own? Were you looking for it to fit your narrative more, or were you just like, okay, well, we've talked a little bit about how the character is sort of compensating for their looks, so what they do is they try and talk a big game, or they try and maybe grovel. I mean, what was the idea behind changing that system up?
Well, it wasn't so much, well, for one, it couldn't have possibly be in a D&D system because it's all about like the power of words. So, um, abilities like strength and dexterity would hardly matter.
Right,
But
right, right.
the main source of inspiration, at least for the three P's, if you will, was for presence at least, is I was thinking to myself and I asked a few friends, what makes you want to do something for someone else? And I boiled it down to three things. You would do something for something else, one, because you like them. They're charismatic, they're charming, they're agreeable, hence the stat charisma. Two, because they have a reputation. They are well respected by other people. You may not like them, but you hear good things about them. It's like they're competent. Thus, there's the stat of reputable. Or third, you don't necessarily like them, you don't necessarily respect them, but because they seem to have power over you and it appears like they could ruin you if they wanted to, which is where Supreme comes in. So the strategies of you can appear to be likable, you can appear to be trustworthy, like you're competent, or you could appear to dominate them, intimidate them. So that's where like the three presence stats come from. And again, I this is stated in the game, but the keyword here is appear to be because I really like this idea of really it's fake it till you'll make it. This protagonist, he has nothing. They have nothing to show for anything. They have no accomplishments. They're not necessarily really likable. They're just putting on an act. But I think I love that. And I think that's the whole point of their character. And I really enjoy how, maybe similar to players playing video games, is you're just putting on a show. So I like that. And that's presence. I did want some element of dirt digging, so discovering secrets relating to interlocutors in advance. So I wanted stats to correspond to that. Thus, knowledge is what you know, and intellect is how you piece things together. And I think that's an important distinction to have because there are knowledge and intellect checks throughout the game as well. So whether you are informed, like whether your network of information is large, is different from you being able to deduce things based on characteristics of a person. So that's where prescience comes in, the second P, and the third P, perception, is well, it's your ability to again, oh, you're seeing on the screen right now, you've got your cues and you got your pointers. Right now, you're seeing a cue, so detecting body language. If I had to say one thing about the game that I wish I developed more was um like more cues, more pointers. I think that could be a really interesting concept, or even having two separate stats, one for cues, one for pointers.
I was just getting
But
ready to ask you about that, because I
oh yeah,
love
no, please ask me about that.
I
Ask
I
me about it.
love the fact that you put in body language, right? Because I think most of us have heard that like 90% of the of what you're saying is can actually be portrayed through your body language and how you move your hands, or like your facial expressions and stuff like that. So what would you have improved upon in that system to maybe make it more prominent, or like why didn't you improve upon it? Did you run out of time, or?
I mean, yeah, time was a real factor. It's not like it's not like it's not there because it is present in the game. It's I wish certain moments that here's the thing. It's this weird combination of if you're able to pick up on the fact that they're lying or they're hiding something from you, that tells you okay, they're lying about this, which is important to know, but you have no way of discovering the truth, the quote unquote truth, unless you have the other stats to back you up. So perception is really good for, so like let's say you lose your first run with an interlocutor. If you don't know what went wrong, if you had perception and you like hovered over things, you're like, oh, there's something about that, maybe I should have asked a little bit more about that, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you victory in any way. So I guess what I would do to improve upon it is play up the importance of it, maybe being able to ask up follow-up questions. That's actually what pointers are from. So earlier on in this video, you could probably see there was points where the mouse would hover over certain words. So what I would do is I would integrate the three aspects of perception more. So I'd have it that if you see body language, when they mention a specific word that's associated with that body language, you can follow up on that. And whilst we're still in this discussion, I do want to discuss about a plus of having monsters instead of humans is that, for instance, if there are some people out there, or I know myself, who aren't necessarily very good with visual cues, or like maybe not always, maybe there's some people who don't understand social norms of us humans, like when we're conversing with one another, they don't pick up on things. If it's, again, in a world of monsters, then whether you have problems with this sort of thing or whether you quote unquote understand social norms, societal norms, you are both reduced to the same skill level within this game because you don't know how like these monsters act or what body language means for these monsters. You don't know
Sure.
if smiling is a good thing or smiling is a bad thing. And I
You've put
like how,
everybody on the same playing
yeah,
field.
exactly, and that's what I want to do. I think GMTK, he briefly touched upon this in his talking and shooting video, very very briefly though, about how maybe words favors those who are, I guess, more emotionally intelligent versus other people. But I didn't want that to be, I didn't want that barrier to be in place. So monsters unintentionally, but also intentionally helped with that vision as well. And one more thing before we ask another question is I just wanted to say to any game developers, it's always better to have your game be easier than it's meant to be versus harder than it's meant to be. Because if it's easier than it's meant to be, more people can see it, and I don't see it as a bad sign. That's why. Oh, I don't know what mode you wait. We'll have to scroll back, but whatever mode you choose at the
I,
beginning,
I chose the default mode.
great. It doesn't impact like if you do it in challenge mode, you don't get a certain reward for doing it in challenge mode. I only put challenge mode in there in case people are like, man, default mode is really easy. Like this is super easy. I'm like, okay, you want a challenge? Put on challenge mode. Just I have it in there in place. Whatever is needed for players to maximize, I guess, their enjoyment from this game. I think a lot of AAA games, I think you've seen it before. I don't know what game it is, but there's this game with 5 difficulty modes. And like for the easiest mode, it's your protagonist, but they have a pacifier, like a
Yes,
baby,
I
like a
think
baby.
that's Wolfenstein
Yeah.
that has like that has like baby easy, super easy. Yeah, and he's got a little bonnet and binky in or something like that, and they're making fun of you for picking the easiest. I
Yeah.
think it's either Wolfenstein or like one of the old school, I don't know, like Duke Nukem or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's I wanted like to do the opposite of that. I want it to be very encouraging. So I have it in the beginning and even like throughout the game, you could just go to preferences and you can adjust, like you can turn off the timer if you want to, you can add on hints when you want to, whenever you want to throughout the game, in case you're finding it a bit difficult or easy. So I wanted it to have a very accessible and adjustable difficulty as well.
That's amazing. I appreciate that because
Thank you.
I'm typically pretty bad at games, or at least starting out. So I want to talk again about the body language because I'm curious if do you think if you had improved that system enough, do you think that could have led to an alternate play style and potentially an alternate ending?
Ooh, oh, here's the thing about it is definitely could lead to alternate playstyle. But the thing about endings is maybe okay, I'll talk about this later, but the thing about Monsters Insight is even though I offer multiple viable strategies to win, it doesn't matter how you win as long as you win. So if you win using presence, perception, and prescience, it doesn't matter. Your win outcome will always be the same.
I
So
see. Okay.
it will be read as the story by the same, except for the last interlocutor, it slightly depends how you win. A little bit like on that note that I wanted to touch upon is the thing about a monster's insight is I do consider it a complete product, but not necessarily a product in the traditional sense. It's more like an amuse-bouche where here's a taster of an idea. In the ideal world where I had an infinite amount of money and infinite amount of time, if I had to make this game, I would definitely do as you say. I'd have probably like 20 interlocutors, multiple story arcs happening, and like between each dialogue, there'd be like multiple things happening. And I definitely want to expand upon different play styles, like whether it be having more stats, whether it be, again, focusing more on like body language or certain words they use and highlighting the importance of that. Like I have a bunch of different ways that I could go about it. So definitely.
That's awesome. I think that's just a super. That's a unique touch to a game that's mostly about the power of words um, and how you sort of present yourself. So we've talked a little bit about it, the different paths and the different ways that you can sort of win over these monsters. Would you mind, for the people who haven't played, would you mind elaborating kind of what your options are in that sense?
Oh, absolutely. I would like to say first before we get to it, I'm adding like a lot of things, but um, I remember I touched upon board games earlier. Because the thing I notice about video games and about board games is video games. A lot of like the main AAA ones, there's only one way to win. So when you look up a walkthrough, it reads a bit like a manual. Like there's step one, step two, step three,
Yeah,
step
that's
four.
very true.
Yeah. Whilst my walkthroughs have been like, okay, there are six different ways you can win if all of these work, all of this give you the same outcome, but I'm just going to list all six ways anyway in case you want to see different dialogue options. So it's like short chunks of a lot of different things you can do.
I
So
I read part of, I think, the first walkthrough, and it kind of read a lot like it was almost like a choose your own adventure in
thank
that
you.
sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it because the thing that board games do is, in order to be fun, there has to be multiple ways of winning. So, like, I mean, if you think of a strategy board game, let's say the person in the lead is pursuing option A, and there's like a person in second who's pursuing option B. If option A is the only viable strategy of winning, then person one playing option A is always going to win. It's not about like, oh, who can outsmart the other? It's who can do strategy A the best. So board games can't have that problem. So what they have to do is they have to provide multiple ways of winning, multiple ways of getting points. And I wanted to incorporate this game design into a Monster's Insight where there are multiple ways you can win. And so the thing about these menu options, as you can see in front of you, is there is no wrong, maybe one, but there is no wrong option in a sense that all of these will be good for one strategy. At least one strategy, if not two. And if you screw up on one strategy, like if you choose an option that locks you out of one strategy, that's all right because there are five other strategies you can still do. I wanted to keep it very open ended. So, pray tell, what are these strategies? I will tell you. So, the thing, the most the most clear strategy you have is blackmailing. So what you need to do is what you didn't do in your playthrough, I see, but what you need to do is you need to choose. Oh, actually, what you did do, you chose to like dig up dirt, and you can either go to the Malduvian River or you can go to the Zilker. That's like two different locations to spice it up a little bit. I originally intended for there to be like one location, and that's the location where you find information. But I was thinking, oh, that's like a bit unrealistic. We don't get everything from one source. So I just wanted there to be two sources. In a bigger game, maybe there would be five different locations, but I only had time for two, so you only get two. So you dig up blackmail, but that itself is not enough because you may not know why is this bad for our interlocutor, or for instance, okay, I know this piece of information, but I don't know how this is bad because you may not understand the culture that they live in or the shame that it brings them. So you need to talk to them to discover what's wrong regarding this. So that's blackmailing as strategy number one. Keep in mind though, with blackmailing, you do need to have other stats. Like the information itself isn't enough. You need to know other things. For one, intimidation, generally, like having a good supreme generally works because otherwise, if you like try to blackmail them out of the blue, they're like, how do you know that? I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to kill you now. And it's like, okay, you need to pull them in first, and then so you need to lure them in, and then you need to show the blackmail. It's like, haha, I got you where I wanted you, and then they start panicking. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is it's we presence plus perception. The reason why I'm keeping it so vague is it honestly really depends from interlocutor to interlocutor. As you
Sure.
probably saw with the strategy update on the screen a few seconds ago, charisma, for instance, isn't very effective against Fernway because they don't think you exist. So whether or not they like you is irrelevant. You need to convince them that they exist in the first place. So so you need to so once you discover that, you're like, okay, I need to have the appropriate presence stats and having good perception. So that's number two. Number three is I don't need to necessarily have good presence, but I could have good knowledge and good intellect and good perception. So and that slightly ties in with the blackmailing thing as well, because having good knowledge and intellect goes well with blackmail, but occasionally, I'm sorry I'm speaking in like such vague terms, there's just like so many different things. But you can do this independently of blackmail, so that's the third thing. And the fourth thing is you don't use perception, which is quite risky, but you use presence and prescience. So those are like your four main archetypes. They depend varying from monster to monster. Occasionally, as you saw again a few seconds ago, there will be strategy updates, like little hints to tell you, oh, this will work, or oh, this will not work, just to sort of help guide the player to get to the right places. Oh, as you saw just now, there was a perception test, and that perception test, what that meant is because you passed it, the queue appears. Otherwise, how it would normally appear is I think it said the rest of us, or normally the rest of us would appear like normal text, like the one you're seeing right now. But because you pass perception test, you're able to see that. So that's in terms of strategies, I think. Yeah.
So I do have a couple of fun questions related to that. When you play your own game, what is your favorite strategy to take? I know we've kind of talked that it depends on the monster you're talking about, but do you have a favorite strategy?
Ooh, oh my goodness. I don't like. It's weird because I don't like prescience, like perception. No, I'm like knowledge and intellect so much, so I don't usually do blackmail. Yet it ends up being quite an important stat throughout the game. I generally like to like use my presence, or like it's like, okay, do I want to be trustworthy? Do I want to be likable? Do I want to be intimidating? And I go along those lines. I will say, as a disclaimer, occasionally you will be tested on the negative versions of those traits. So like that sounds a bit weird, but I included the option there in the menu just for like more advanced players in case they want to say, oh, what if I do plus supreme negative charisma? What's that going to get me? Which is also a viable strategy, by the way. Um, so that's another thing too. I generally don't like to use negative stats because I'm not that advanced in my own game yet. I apologize. Generally I like to be quite well round. If I'm not going for presence and perception, I really love perception. Going for well rounded, like trying to get one of each is like a good default base, and it's a safe option. So yeah.
So that's kind of interesting that doing putting 1 point in everything is a well-rounded, because I think typically when you play, well, maybe not games like this, but I feel like typically when you play like RPGs, you really want to lean into something, that's definitely going to help you down the road or that fits your play style. I mean, was that a development decision that you made where you were like, I don't want people to think too hard about it. You can literally put 1 point into everything and you'll be okay.
Um, well, here's the thing. It was partly like based on feedback because even like with you're playing in the default mode, and the default mode you don't have the emotion hints. So if people are unsure, like really unsure of, okay, like does this option, will this make me come across as intimidating? Will this option make me come across as trustworthy? Again, these things can be quite subjective. And even though this is set in monsters, it may be a bit like unfair to players who are like, oh, I didn't know this option would make me sound intimidating. So what I did is instead of focusing like, oh, you need like more than 5 points of supreme, what I did is for every single, like, in order to pass I guess the dialogue is you'll be tested on 2 to 3 stats, generally speaking. So actually, like, focusing everything in 1 point is actually not the way to go. And it helps, like, if you're just trying to be like a little good at everything, it can help. I will give a disclaimer that for the last one, it is a bit more it is a bit more difficult. So as you progress through the game, you'll obviously get more points to distribute, and with that, the tests become harder to pass as well. So that's why you may require more than one. I think I only came across one person who managed to complete this whole game like without any failures. Like they just did it all in one go. And I was very, very surprised because that wouldn't be me, which is why I also have walkthroughs on my page. All of them accessible, you can read them, and they're there to help and just to help you get through the game. So there's that.
So I think my another fun question that I have, since we're seeing Fernway here, do you have a favorite monster that you maybe while you were in development, or one that you drew, or maybe you have two, one that was fun developing and one that was fun drawing?
Ooh, nice fun question. I think core mayhem, you don't see them here. They're the heart that you see in it's like the cover of my game. It's on a lot of promotional material. That was the most fun to draw for me. The most fun to write, because like writing is a big part of it too, was unfortunately it's the third interlocutor, so like you won't see them here. But the thing is, Fernway and Cormeum, when I wrote them like they were. Fernway is a skeptic. It's like a soft little skeptic, just harmless anodyne. Cormeum is two hedonists, one who pretends to be like an elitist and superior, and the other one is a little bit addicted to pleasure. So they're like embodiments of, I guess, classical philosophies. But the last interlocutor is the first one that I wrote like an actual person. They aren't so easily boxed into, oh, you belong to like this philosophical thought. They have their own thoughts, they have their own ideas, they have their own motivations, ambitions. Again, I'm not going to say too much because play the game if you want to find out. But they were a lot fun writing, and I think though I like each of my creations. I love each of them. They're all my little babies.
In your own special way.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Fernway is like the most likable. Like of when I was doing playtest, I only managed to do playtesting after I released the first version, which is terrible. I did not have time to even fully play through my own game, which I uploaded until like April or so. But most people who played it seem to find Fernway really endearing and like sweet because they're just there, so harmless. Yeah.
I don't know. Fernway kind of scares me. I probably have the complete opposite reaction to Fernway. I think it's because he you cannot convince him that anything is real. The only thing that is real to him is the chasm and what happens in the chasm, and that's it. And even that he's very skeptical about. And I don't know. I think somebody who like can't believe, in anything is, I don't know. To me, he freaks me out a little bit, I guess. It
Oh,
makes me a little uneasy.
that is a complete also like valid feeling to have about them as well. Personally, I don't deal with a lot of that existential fear, and because when like studying philosophy, epistemology is all about the studying of like how we know things. I've become very intimate and familiar with that conversation, but maybe people who like haven't really thought about like really sat down and thought like does that is anything real? Am I even real? It can be quite intimidating for them. Also, I think you see throughout at certain points, like you see mouths and eyes on top of them. A note about that: those are not real; those are illusions. Fernway themselves can't. They, whatever. They can't properly emote, so they just have these embodied things floating on top of them to make it seem like they emote to other people, which I think is a bit. That's like a bit more scary to me of their characters that they can't. They're like so empty, like they're such a void that they can't properly express emotions unless they conjure up fake things to put in front of themselves.
Sure. Well, and I think that's part of what makes him unsettling to me is that he himself is just like a rolling fog cloud. Like, of course, he does not believe that anything is real because he himself would dissipate with a strong wind. Like, I don't know. It's one of those. It's a weird thing for me to think about Fernway.
Yeah. Anything is as long as you get some impression of them, then that's like what matters for me, pretty much. Yeah. So anything goes.
So I do have another fun question. You've kind of talked about some of your. I think you've said some of your playtesters and some of your friends have played this game. Have friends, family, how many people like that have played this game, and what do they think about it?
Oh. Um, well, my friend, when she played it, she had a lot of positive feedback. She seemed to really like it. I have two younger sisters who are super, super supportive of me, and they're really kind. And both of them have played my this game as well. And it's weird because the thing is, if you're an indie developer and you show it to people who are used to playing AAA games, there's like a bit of that's like that cognitive dissonance. Like this isn't like God of War or something
Right.
like that. But generally speaking, my sisters, they've played enough. They've played a bit of my other games that I've submitted for game jams, so they know what to expect, and they like this one the best. I guess my parents have had a look at it too, but like not really. So I don't know. But generally, my family is. I haven't really showed it to that many friends because not a lot of my friends. Oh, one other friend did play it, but most of my friends aren't really interested in video games. So I don't want to be like a burden. It's like, oh, play my game, even though I know you don't like video games. So my
Sure.
family is mostly the one that supports me and knows what's going on.
Okay. So to change subjects here a little bit, you've mentioned a couple times that this game was for a game jam. This game's not on Steam, right? It's on itch only.
Yes,
Okay.
because I don't have $100 to pay for the entrance fee. That's another subject. But yes, please continue.
Well, I was gonna say, I how did you hear about the game jam? I think itch has like a game jam section. What were the rules for the game jam? Like, I don't know. As somebody, I used to study programming for a little bit, but I don't think I ever really participated in a game jam. I don't really know like how to find them, or are there any sort of like typical rules that people should look out for?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk about game jams generally, and then I'll focus on my specific game jam that I participated in. Game jams, generally speaking, all of them have a time limit. Most of them tend to have like, it ranges from 1 day to 1 week most of the time, like 1 week. So a 1 month game jam, those are quite rare to find. And I generally like the ones that are 1 week long. That's my ideal space. So 1 to 2 weeks. I did one once in 2 days. But those are quite difficult. Sometimes you'll have game jams that come with themes. So, for instance, game jam I did before A Monster's Insight was the theme was less is more. It was the Blackthorn Prod game jam. So sometimes they'll give you something abstract like that. Sometimes like the GMTK game jam, which I participated in, says something like um random or dual purpose mechanics. So the themes can range from like abstract aphorisms, less is more, to actual game design principles that you need to implement in your game. So dual weeding, dual purpose design. So that's it, like in terms of game jams and themes. Most game jams you'll find on itch. There are a few like really famous ones outside of itch, such as the Global Game Jam, Ludum Dare, obviously, and there are a lot of like competitions you can submit it to. I rarely see ones with prize money, but that's also a thing too. So if you come first or second, like, oh, some game jams are ranked. So some game jams comes with themes, some game jams are ranked. And some game jams that are ranked also come with prize money, but I've never participated in any of those, so I can't speak. For the game jam I participated for A Monster's Insight was NaNoWriMo. My first game I ever published was submitted for NaNoWriMo 2017. So that's how I became familiar with it because it was the first game I ever made. Well, not the first one I ever made, the first one I ever made to the public that I published officially. So, whilst, you know, as I was in quarantine, reminiscing, introspection, I was thinking, when I was making a lot of games, I was thinking to myself, a reason I got into games in the first place was I was drawn to like RPG horror games, but I was drawn to games with narratives, strong narratives from stories. And I was thinking, oh, I've been doing a lot of game jams, which is really fulfilling in its own right, but these game jams don't really allow me to create compelling narratives in 2 days or 1 week. I feel a bit rushed, like I'm stressed for pressure. So I wanted to create a game with a strong narrative. And I was thinking of returning to my roots, and I thought, hey, I participated in NaNoWriMo a couple of years ago. Why not give it another shot and see how much I've improved? I'd like to think I improved over my last game that I made, but that's how I got into the game jam.
So you typically find them on itch? Did you find NaNoWriMo is an itch game jam?
NaNoWriMo is an itch game jam, and NaNoWriMo, can I say, it has been consistently going since, I may have the dates wrong, but like 2010. So
Wow, okay.
it's like it's like been pretty consistent. And like with that pace, I'm thinking, you know what? So I knew that there was going to be one for 2021 because there's one for 2017. There's going to be one for 2021. Um, if you want to just find where a bunch of game jams are, itch.io is the best place to go. If you want to go to game jams where a lot of people are going to be there and they're really famous, you can do two things. You either go to itch and you just go to the game jam with the most number of people who've applied to or joined the jam in advance. So you just go to that. Or you go to Ludum Dare slash global game jam slash um, any other prize money things. But perhaps there are probably websites out there too which detail the most famous game jams, but most of the game jams I participate in are through itch. It really is an amazing website and it allows for game devs to guess publish their games, publish comics as well, didn't expect that, and join game jams.
Oh, I didn't know you could publish comment or comics on itch.
You can publish a lot of things. You can publish comics, books, text documents.
What?
Yeah, like you could just put up a text document, and there's this weird thing I saw in Itch. It was called the Void Manual, and the concept was, hey, we've seen games without manuals, but have we seen manuals without games? And then on the page, there's no game, but there's a manual of how to play this fictional game. And if you pay $2, you can download it. And I just came across it and I thought, oh wow, that's an interesting concept. Okay, so yeah, a bunch of things go on itch.
So we've talked a little bit about um, the benefits of itch, and have kind of scratched the surface of Steam. I mean, what are the benefits of itch over Steam or Steam over itch? I mean, I know that Steam is very, very, very oversaturated when it comes to games. I mean, what are your impressions? I mean, is it just a preference that you like itch, or have you put something on Steam before?
The reason why I haven't put anything on Steam is because I need to pay for it. For me, at least, when I was making games, I never thought I could make money off of it. I was like, okay, I'm just doing this because it's my passion. I love coding. I love doing digital art. I like creating narratives, ludo narratives, all that interesting stuff. Um, and I didn't realize I could get paid until slight little promotion there, but for the Indie Apocalypse Zine, which is also on itch. So when I started getting paid, that's I still don't have enough money to like even pay the entrance fee for Steam. So that's one barrier to Steam, and one pro to itch is you can just sign up for free and you can start posting games like this instantly. You don't need to like accumulate this entrance fee. But the thing about Steam that it has over itch is just objectively speaking, more people know it, and more people, and you're going to have a much larger viewer base versus itch. One of my friends who she was developing a game, and she was presenting it at a con, and people were asking her, "Wow, I really like this game. Where can I get it?" And she said, "Oh, you can get it on itch." And they're like, "What's itch? Like an itch, like a back itch?" And she said, "No, itch.io. You can get it there." I said, "Okay." Around the sixth person who told her, "I don't know what itch is. Are you going to put it on Steam?" She's like, "Yes, it's also going on Steam." So she didn't intend for it to be on Steam, but because nobody knew what itch was, but everyone was asking her, "Oh, why don't you put it on Steam? Put it on Steam." So she had to like find a way to get the money to put it on Steam. So that's one thing Steam has. But one really important thing I do want to note that itch has over Steam is in terms of your revenue. So when you publish a game on Steam and you decide to make a commercial, 50% of the cut goes to Valve, 50% of the cut goes to the developers. On itch, you decide the cut. By default, it's 10%. And
Oh, wow.
you
Okay.
can slide it down to 0% if you wanted to. But
I see. Okay. Yeah, so I noticed that this game was a pay what you want game, which is something that I really appreciated because sometimes you find games on Steam that are early access and they want you to pay like $35 and they're really worth like 5. So, I appreciated the fact that this was a pay what you want. Can you set a price? Can you just say, "Hey, you need to pay 5, $10 for this and I won't take anything else," or is that kind of the is that sort of the overall theme of itch, is that you can download this game for free, you can get some extra stuff for like $2-3?
Um, I think a lot of games on itch, from my impression, and that's when I weren't learnt of the pay what you will system because a lot of these games, like I download them for free, but you can choose to like donate tips. Like there's even a little feature in itch. It's like, hey, feel free to give the developer tips, and it's got like a cute little plus $1 icon, plus $2 icon, etc. Um, I will say none of my games originally, I didn't attach any sort of payment system to any of my games. So even if you wanted to donate, you couldn't because again, I think that's what a lot of indie developers may think is like, oh, my game isn't like good enough to even receive like a single dollar from someone. But if you put in a lot of effort and work into it, then um you can ask for like you can let people give you like it's not even demanding people to pay you money, just letting people give you a tip if they so choose. And I really like that aspect, that culture of it, and I really appreciate it too because I don't want my games to be put behind a paywall. I don't want to say, hey, pay five $55 or more to pay my game, otherwise you can't play it, because that kind of defeats the whole point of why I'm making these games. I mean, I'm not only making them for myself, although that's a big part is I want to make the games that I want to see, but I'm making it so I can hear back from other people. That's why I really appreciate feedback and such. So if I ask people to pay for it, it's like that just seems wrong to me because you playing my game, you downloading a game, that is a favor to me. I feel almost indebted to you. And if you're willing to like donate to me, I was like, wow, oh my goodness, when people like even the smallest, when I got like the smallest donation, I felt so happy because wow, that means that my game, you must have really liked my game, which is why if you donate $2 or more, there's like a little thank you booklet where I put in a bunch of concept art. I put in like works in progress of backgrounds. I talk about inspirations. And it's like a little PDF file for anyone who wants it. I was inspired by other games where when I really liked their games, and I wanted to support developers, I really appreciated the fact that they had these little, like, cute little PDF booklets where you get to see the developers process, especially as someone who was an aspiring game developer, or at least an aspiring hobbyist game developer. To see like someone's process behind things was really especially enlightening for me. So
Sure. Wow. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a slightly different take on from everything else that I've heard. So, well, you've been awesome. You've answered all my questions. I don't have any more questions for you. Do you have a like a shout out? You want to thank anybody or ask any other questions or
ooh.
have anything you want to talk about?
Well, in terms of like public public recognition, I would like to say LGM, who again all of their links are on the page and all that. LGM, who did a fantastic job on creating the soundtrack for this game. Like this game has like over 28 minutes of original music. And
It's really cool. And I think it's
yes,
like lo-fi. It's like a lo-fi eldritch horror playlist or something like that. It was really cool.
yes, it's I described when I was asking him to do music, I was like, write it like it's creepy lo-fi hip hop beats plus a little bit of inspiration from like other video games like Danganronpa V3 soundtrack, Lisa the First soundtrack, Hylix 2, like a bunch of games that I really liked and lo-fi just smashed into one. And I think he did an excellent job. I also want to thank Sayumi 101 or Sayumi Aikawa. I think that's what she's called on her Twitter page. Unfortunately, she didn't get to she didn't make it for the full ride. I think halfway through the game jam her computer crashed and she like lost a lot of her files, so she didn't get to do all of the menu buttons. Like you see the quick time buttons in front, well the ones like the newspaper on the sides, I had to do those myself, but when she had the files backed up, they really helped. So I'd like to thank her too for that. Thanking my friends and family who've supported me for so long. And I guess if I had to say like one more thing is I think what's really important for video game developers is although video games are amazing and I think there can be so much you can do with them, I think there's an importance to having inspirations outside of the games you play. A lot of like the greatest games you've ever played are people who got inspiration outside of it. I'm sure you heard like Breath of the Wild developers, like one of the lead designers was really into rock climbing and like that sort of influenced like the game mechanics in rock climbing. A Pokemon was based on catching bugs as a kid. Like all these like fun little ideas and um that's the thing about A Monster's Insight is it wasn't really based on any other game I've played before. It was just based on a lot of different passions and love that I've had for several different like media, whether it be, board games or film or literature or just academic like philosophy or just like creepy design of monsters like illustrations that I've seen online. So getting inspiration from all like a diversity of different sources can really help to create something I don't to like give you game ideas in general. Yeah.
Well, I honestly don't think I could have ended this episode any better. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for your time. A Monster's Insight is on itch.io. It is a pay what you want. So I would highly recommend it. And thank you, Arkicade, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was lovely to talk about my project.